Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to day two of the statewide Independent Living Council meeting. First thing we're going to do is do a roll call of members, voting members or things. So, Dawn, if you'll take care of that part.
Certainly, this is Dawn Lyons, and I'll go ahead and start with letting you know that our chair, Julie Weissman-Steinbaugh, is excused absent today. Evander Davis,
Here.
Sabra McWhirter-Clark,
Here.
Margaret Marcucci,
Here.
Linda Voivoda,
Here.
Peter Whittingham,
I'm here.
Obioma Officer. She may be joining a little late. Ashley Crow.
Here.
Sheena Childers.
Here.
And Lori Lutu.
Here.
Great. We do have quorum.
Great. All right. And next thing we're going to do is the participation. If you can read that thing that we usually read.
Now, Evander, did you intend for me to read the public comment, or did you intend to do introductions first?
Yeah, public comment. Sorry.
Okay, sure.
Let's do that.
So no action may be taken upon a matter raised under public comment period unless the matter itself has been specifically included on an agenda as an action item. To provide public comment telephonically, dial 1-253-215-8782 US Tacoma. When prompted to provide the meeting ID, enter 929-904-1434 and passcode 707401. Comments will be allowed at the beginning and end of each day and will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Person making comments will be asked to begin by stating their name for the record and to spell their last name and to provide the secretary with written comments.
Great. Do we have anyone that has any comments at this time?
So Mary Evil Sizer had her hand up first.
All righty, let's do it.
Good afternoon, everyone. And again, Happy New Year. For the record, this is Mary Evil Sizer, the Executive Director for the Southern Nevada Center for Independent Living. I just wanted to share a housekeeping update with the SILC that pertains to both the SILC, the CILs, and the IL program. Our software platform that we use to submit our 704s or PPRs, what is actually our annual reports right now, is not functioning. So the extensions have been given to the centers till March 31st to submit their reports. And for those that had submitted their reports, like our center, they were asked to make a copy in Word. There's just some contractual technical difficulties. We believe everything is going to be okay in the end. Q90 is a wonderful platform for all of us, but just wanted to give you that housekeeping update. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would like to speak at this time?
Margaret Marcucci has her hand up next.
All right, Margaret.
Hi, this is Margaret Marcucci, Marcucci. I'm with RCIL in Elko. I told Dawn and I told Dee Dee I had gotten a phone call from Elko Daily Free Press to do an interview with them next week on what RCIL does and how to get information out there.
Great. All right, thank you. Is there anyone else?
Mary, did you have your hand up again, or did you just forget to put it down?
My apologies, I forgot to put it down. Thank you.
Okay. I don't see any other hands up at this time, Evander.
Great, then we're gonna move on. What was next? What did I miss?
So agenda item number 4 is member introductions and public introductions from individuals interested in council membership and member announcements.
All right, do we have any of those done?
Is there anyone present who is interested in SILC membership that wasn't here yesterday? Ellen, you have your hand raised?
I do. Thank you. My name is Ellen Marquez for the record. I have put my application in to become a member of the SILC. I have a 21-year-old daughter that has Down syndrome. She consistently asks me to find her an apartment. She wants to move into an apartment. She wants to buy her own home. She is currently the intern in for the council. And I feel that I am very qualified to be part of the SILC to give my personal expertise on independent living and trying to create a person with a disability to be independent, especially after I am gone. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen. This is Dawn Lyons. Just to let you know, I will be contacting you after the meeting to talk with you, discuss that with you, and thank you for your interest. Is there anything else? I know someone just joined the meeting. Is there anyone else at this time who would like to express interest in becoming a SILC member? Okay, I guess that's it, Evander.
Great. Now we're going to move on to the approval of the minutes for last November. Did we get that taken care of? Was it up?
We did, Evander. There was a little bit of miscommunication, but we did get those posted and posted yesterday. In fact, I don't know if everyone had a chance to look them over, but I'll give you guys the choice right now. I can either pull them up as a material and we can go through them right now, or if you've had a chance to go through them, you can give us your feedback on it right now or make a motion to either pass or change them.
All right. Is there anyone who would like to make a motion or discuss any changes or have them read line by line?
This is Saber McWhorter Clark for the record. I'd like to make a motion to pass them. I did get a chance to read them. I'm not sure, though, how many others did. Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion.
This is Linda Vejvoda. Sorry about that, Evander. This is Linda Vejvoda, VEJVODA. I second that motion.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Hearing none, seeing none. I don't see any, but Don, you see anybody?
I do not see any opposed.
Motion passed. Thank you. Okay, so we did all our updates except for the NCIL. Is her name Lisa, right?
Correct, but I don't know if at Northern Nevada Center for Independent Living has a representative present.
Is there anyone from the Northern Nevada Center for Independent Living in the building today? Okay, so we're gonna, if someone comes in before we get done with this meeting, we will have them do that update. If not, then we will have to see them next time. Next on our agenda is we didn't get an update from AT, right? Assistant Tech, John Rosen. Is John Rosen in today?
John is here. Are you able to use your audio, John?
Yes, I am.
Hi, John. How are you today?
Good. How are you, Evander?
Great. If you could give us that wonderful update that you always do so well, we would be very happy.
Sounds good. John Roseland for the record, Aging Disability Services, specifically the Nevada Assistive Technology Collaborative, which includes the Assistive Technology for Independent Living program, which often referred to as the state independent living, but it is just a program that fits specific needs. If anybody ever has any questions, please reach out to me and we'll go over what the program details are. What I was going to go through today is the annual reporting stuff that you Mary just talked about in the public comment about the reporting system. The AT for Independent Living program, since it's funded in part by the SILC, collects all of the consumer data the same way that a Center for Independent Living would, in the exact same format, and it's reported in the SILC's PPR. All of the information was sent yesterday. I got that all kind of wrapped up, and unfortunately, there's a lot of tables and a lot of things that aren't very accessible. So I can go through this at any level that you really want to, but the reporting data has been provided in a spreadsheet format with multiple tabs in the different sections. I also took it and put it into the PPR instrument that is provided to the SILC, which is a Word document, but it still has embedded tables and so on. It may or may not be accessible. I didn't test it. I did plug the information in there though and send it forward. Again, if anybody at any point in time, hello?
Go ahead, Ron. John. I think we just had a little feedback.
Okay.
Go ahead and give us that abridged version.
Yeah, it took me off track. Now I've lost my spiel. So again, if there's anything that anybody goes through, it sounds like you have until March to finalize this. Please reach out to me. The data is a consequence of all of the consumer service records that we create through that program. And I'll kind of just go over the highlights unless you want to line by line. That could take a little bit of time, but I'm more than happy to do that. What do we have interest in?
This is Dawn Lyons, John. I actually did not get a chance to, since I got them yesterday, make sure that they were accessible and post them yet. I will do that by the end of today. But I think probably anyone else speak up to who has an opinion, but I think probably just highlights would be great.
Perfect. Yeah, you have until March, so I'm sure this can come up again, and it sounds like you have some CILs that aren't at the table today, so it may be good to postpone that, but the information is there. I was going to put it in a text document, but it's very, unless it's specifically requested, it takes quite a bit of time to break those tables down so that it does work correctly. I'm happy to do it, but if you can check it, that'd be great. So the annual reporting information that comes out of our cases, again, very much like Centers for Independent Living tracks, things like how many consumers were served, and that breaks down to how many were carried over from a previous year and how many were new during that year. This year we had a total of 287 consumers. That breakdown, bear with me, now my screen logs up. 173 consumers carried over, 114 consumers were open new during the year. I would say that probably going into next year, we're going to have a lot less carried over. And that's largely going to be in part to the ARPA funds that the program received to eliminate the wait list. So over this year, we're probably going to see that wait list really drop off, but then it's going to just climb right. I think we're going to see it climb right back unless the program gets a substantial increase in the state funding. Next part, there's different sections, and what I provided Dawn and Evander with is kind of a breakdown of a table and the sections that those will fit into. The different subparts are part of that annual report, and each section is described and the location. But I'll just kind of go through some of those. So those sections equate to how many consumers were served during the year, how many of those cases were closed. We had 148 consumer service records closed, and the reasons why. moved, withdrawn, died, completed all goals, etc. That's part of your annual report. How many were active during the year? How many people signed a waiver? How many didn't sign a waiver? A waiver is referring to the independent living plan, where the individual has the ability to have this plan that has steps and timeframes and who's doing what. It's a planned out map, or signing a waiver where you just have the independent living goal. There's a section with the age breakdown. There's a section for sex. There's a section for race, ethnicity, disability. And then it breaks into some of the information, individual services. Individual services, I think there's a total of 25 individual services. We collect that information according to your reporting, which is how many were requesting the service and how many received the service. The individual service piece, I'm going to tell you, our reporting in our system is not great. It is a complicated method that we have to collect it. In my opinion, individual services mean nothing because we know what we're providing in the end, but we don't report how many ramps or how many things. We report how many goals are met and those important things. The individual services are a piece of that, but if you look at our individual services, just know that that's not a very accurate reading. It's just the best we can do. We can either have staff spend a lot of time in trying to keep that information updated, or we can have them doing the work that they need to do with consumers. And I choose the latter. Next is the independent living goals, your section B. And this is a breakdown of how many goals were set, how many goals were achieved during the year, and how many are in progress. In the spreadsheet I provided, I did create another column that's not in the not in your annual report, but it's just a calculation that says how many were not met. You can do the calculation yourself, but I like to add that because I want to know myself how many were not met. And I would say that in our current reporting system, we can get that information. We know if somebody withdrew from a goal because we couldn't contact them. We've built that into our reporting because we really want to understand why goals aren't. This report doesn't give you that information, by the way, but that's what I'm saying. If anybody at any time wants to find out more information about the serving of the consumers, we can coordinate a time and I'll go through it with you. One of the last portions of the section is individual achievements. This breaks into transportation, healthcare services, and assistive technology. And we provide you with reporting in that area. Again, it's consumers requiring access, achieving access, and how many in progress. Last but not least, and this is a separate document that was provided to Don Evander to be posted, and that is it's called subpart 3, section C. And that piece, bear with me just one second. I go through my computer screen here. That's really a description of kind of a more in-depth of individual services and achievements. And this is a narrative that I put together. I've been putting this narrative together for about 17 years for the SILC. And it really kind of just, the piece that we provide is about the ATIL program. It as briefly as possible, we describe what the program is, what its focus is on that essential daily living barrier piece, the prioritization to keep people from going into an institution, either prevention or transition out of. And then it also includes all of our survey data that I share with you guys quite often. It's all in that report for the end of the year. Everything from satisfaction to life impacts and the percentages that the percentage of those voluntary return surveys that we received. Last but not least, again, it's a separate document. It is also in the PPR instrument, Don. But it's that there's a table within your report that is community events. And, these are outreaches and collaborations, and there's a host of things that are possible in there. And through that program and through Care Chest, they do 47 of them, and it's just not feasible to list each one of those. And so some years back, Don and I worked together and found we would just kind of consolidate those in the entity type. So if it was a public awareness or an outreach or some type of promotion of the independent living program or outreach, again, public awareness, we would consolidate those by the type that they are. So this year that breaks down to community events. So these are Disability Awareness Day down in Las Vegas. That's one of those that's on there. And what we do is we break those down. So how many events were there? We reported how many events were participated by Care Chest, how many people were engaged. Sometimes that has to be an estimate, and then how many hours were put forward. All of that information is in your report there. Basically, we took 47 different community activity events and merged them into 5 different descriptions. And then the description will say how many hours were put into it, how many people were reached, all of that information will be in. So that's a pretty fast rundown as usual. Not as usual, I guess, because I usually get more into the line by line, but that's what you have for the end of your APR year. Again, I really like to look at the data. It really is helpful to me to know what we're doing and are we impacting individuals, and are we accomplishing our goal of providing alternatives and living in the community. And I've been around a while, so I do understand this data pretty well, and I do know the indicators. I believe I do anyways. And those combinations of that consumer service record, goals being set, goals being achieved. We don't focus on how many grab bars were put on a wall. That's really irrelevant. It's really those pieces, right? That goal was set. The consumer has choice and control, and we're really defining that. They're deciding, was that goal met? And then that last piece of satisfaction, and then what were those impacts to their life? And that's it in a nutshell.
John, this is Dawn Lyons. Thank you so much for putting that all together and getting that to us so quickly. I know just a couple weeks ago, we thought it was going to be due at the end of January. So we have a little extra time now, but that's very much appreciated how thorough you always are. And I wanted to let everyone know, again, I apologize that those aren't posted yet. They will be posted by the end of today. And if anyone has any questions, if they don't have John's direct contact information, you guys can contact me directly. I'll put my email address in the chat again for you.
John Roseland, for the record, one last piece, and a part of that's not Dawn's, me getting that to Dawn and Evander yesterday late. I thought I didn't even realize that there was a SILC meeting this month. I thought it was going to be after the reporting piece, or else I'd have got through it in December and we'd had that a little bit more prepared. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, John. Always a pleasure to receive your report. It's always very informative. Not as long as usual, but we can take that too. Thank you so much. And our next step is we're going to have a presentation from the DAG.
You want me to read?
Yes.
Okay, so it's agenda item number 8, presentation of information regarding open meeting law updates by Todd M. Weiss Esquire, Senior Deputy Attorney General. Todd, so glad to have you here. Thank you so much for providing this for us.
I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Would you like me to present your PowerPoint that you provided?
Please, I was just about to ask that.
Okay.
So while we're getting that up, I'll go ahead and introduce myself. Again, my name is Todd Weiss. I am the Senior Deputy Attorney General in the Boards and Open Government Division. We are primarily responsible for all of the state's boards and commissions. We help bodies just like this one with open meeting law advice regularly. We have many other client bodies that we provide day-to-day legal advice for. Luckily, this body is not one that asks a lot of us, but I'm happy to be here to give you guys some of the basics for Nevada open meeting law. And I'm gonna I'm gonna relatively quickly go through this presentation. Most people have a basic understanding of what open meeting law does, and a lot of the very particular nuts and bolts don't really you don't need to concern yourselves with those kind of things. That's more for the staff. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time going through those things. I'm sure a lot of you have questions though, so I'm going to try to get to the question and answer session as quickly as we can so that you guys can get all your burning questions off, and I can see if I can help you with that. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and move to the second slide, which will give you just a brief overview of what we're going to look at today. And if anyone has any specific questions in a particular area before I move on a slide, we can do that then there. I don't want to wait till the end and you forget your question and then we don't get to it. So if any of these areas that we're going to go through, you have a burning question about, raise your hand and we'll stop and talk about it before we move on to the next section. And obviously you're always free to save your questions for the end as well if you prefer. All right, let's move into the next slide, please. So the stated purpose of the open meeting law, and I'm not going to read everything verbatim, but I do want to read this because I think it's very important in understanding what we look at when we have open meeting law questions and dilemmas. Enacting this chapter, and sorry, this comes from NRS chapter 241. In enacting this chapter, the legislature finds and declares that all public bodies exist to aid in the conduct of the people's business. It is the intent of the law that their actions be taken openly and that their deliberations are conducted openly. So open, and there's different definitions for which bodies qualify under open meeting law. The reality is that almost every single government and semi-governmental body is subject to open meeting law. It's meant to be very expansive and apply to just about everything. The primary considerations that anytime we're looking at a question or dilemma when it comes to open meeting law is, does it further the purpose of transparency for the general public? And really that's the overarching concern for everything, because I'll explain to you as we get into this, but most people are shocked to find out that the open meeting law, the way it is written, does not have a black and white yes no answer to just about every kind of situation you can imagine. And that's done, and that's for a purpose, to be honest, because there's so many variations in factual scenarios and questions that come up on really a day-to-day basis. I mean, I see a different open meeting law question and issue just about every single day, and I've been doing this for years. It's that intrinsic. So there's no possible way they could have addressed every single one of those potential situations in one written document. So a lot of it is kind of left up to subjective interpretation, which is a good thing and a bad thing. I mean, it's not good in the sense that I can't always point you to a statute and say, yes, the statute says you can do this or can't do that. But the positive of that is that it allows us to be a little bit flexible and interpret these things within the confines of what we know the purpose of open meeting law is. So when we're in doubt, when the written open meeting law is not overly clear on a question, we think about it in the context of, is this furthering the purpose of transparency in government, or is it doing the opposite and not promoting transparency in government? And we always try to err on the side of promoting transparency, and it's meant to be an exhaustive and widely applicable law for good reason, which I'll get into with the next slide and future slides. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this is what I was talking about earlier about the definition of who OML applies to. I'm not gonna read what's on the slide. The important thing to remember is that it applies to just about every body you can imagine. There's very few. One of the few exceptions that I know it doesn't apply to are the legislature. That's the big one that they're exempt from open meeting law, but that's pretty much it. It applies to just about everyone, and it also includes subcommittees. And I'm going to have a specific discussion about subcommittees later on, because I know that's a common question that we get all the time is, under what circumstances can we have a subcommittee? I'm sorry, my camera is in the wrong place. What circumstances can we have a subcommittee? What can a subcommittee do? That's a very common question, so I'll make sure I address that. But even those subcommittees are subject to open meeting law, and we always err on the side of applying open meeting law as to not. Honestly, unless the statute says you are specifically exempt from open meeting law, which it doesn't for just about anyone except for the legislature, you are subject to open meeting law. And then we have here some definitions for what a meeting is. And that's important too for the purposes of avoiding what I'll get into later is called walking quorums or serial quorums. It's the reason that we always advise that any board business, any board matters for discussion, that those be done only between members in the open meeting and as part of the scheduled notice and agenda. And the reason for that is open meeting law, because the definition of a meeting is any quorum of members for the body and in discussion of a matter that is or will be a matter for discussion for the larger body. So if you have a running email thread with several board members, and let's say it's a 5-person board and 3 of you regularly discuss things over email about what's going to be coming up on a future agenda and how you feel about that and your thoughts on that, you are engaging in you've done a meeting that is not subject, or sorry, let me think how to phrase this. You have inadvertently started a meeting even though you are not complying with open meeting law requirements. And that's what we call either a walking quorum or a serial quorum. That is very bad news. One of my jobs here, in addition to just my day-to-day board client stuff, is I investigate open meeting law complaints. And that is probably the most common open meeting law complaint we get, is that some group of a body were having off the record discussions and deliberations about their matters that are outside the public meeting space. That is a big no-no, and that can have serious consequences up to and including, a reversal of any decision that was made on the record because you discussed it previously off the record, and we don't know what you and the other members discussed during that private conversation. Sometimes this happens inadvertently, and I'll get into, inadvertent situations where this happens, because those are, the open meeting law is not draconian. It's not meant to be punitive, and mistakes do happen. And as long as you rectify it as soon as you realize it and don't let it affect your action and your official position on a board or commission, there's not usually an issue. But unfortunately, we see too often that it is used specifically for the purpose of circumventing open meeting law, because members want to be able to discuss their feelings about something that's on an agenda, but they don't feel comfortable doing that in the open meeting space. So they think, I'll just get a few of us on a text thread or an email thread and chat about it there so that I can have my private opinions. It's not allowed, and I feel for you if you have opinions that you don't feel comfortable sharing in the public, but our responsibilities to the transparency for the general public is always outweighs that. So I'll get into a little bit more of that later, but it's important to know when a meeting has been started, and it's simply any quorum of members and deliberation of board business. That's it. That's all it requires. And anytime you have that, open meeting law needs to be adhered to, and all the regulations that go with that. Can I move to the next slide, please? So this goes to what we were just talking about. This is the thing. You're not prohibited from getting together with other members of your board or commission in social capacities. You can go have dinner with several board members. You can get together at a function. None of that is disallowed. What would be problematic is if you do that and then discuss board business. So that's the important distinction. Nobody's telling you that you can't associate or talk to other people that are on the board or commission that you're on. You just cannot discuss board commission business outside of the public meeting space. That's really all it is. Because a lot of people say, well, if I just run into someone at the water cooler, I can't talk to them. Of course you can. You can talk about the weather, you can talk about your sports teams, you can talk about anything you want that's not board business. There are exceptions to open meeting law. One of the big ones is not legislative, legal briefings that we can do for boards and commissions. And the reason behind that, I think is fairly obvious. It's because if you're in a litigation, it would be pretty hampering to your litigation strategy if you could only discuss it in an open meeting where anyone, including the opposing party in the litigation, could hear and listen to your thoughts and strategies and everything that's supposed to remain confidential. So it probably wouldn't happen with this board very much, but I do have some board commission clients that are regularly involved in litigation, and for those, we can have off the record legal briefings. The important thing, obviously, is that I or the board's attorney are the ones that are leading that meeting. I've seen some boards try to abuse that and call it a legal briefing when it's not actually that. They're just trying to avoid OML. That's not good, and I would never allow any of my clients to do that. But it's an important tool when there is litigation going on that we need to be able to update the board on outside of the open public meeting space. This is probably more for staff, but be aware of it as members as well. Reply all is the devil, and that always creates problems, and for the same reasons that we've just been talking about. So and this, like I said, it's more for the staff members, but when a staff member comes to me and says, well, I need to advise all the members about XYZ, is inefficient and annoying as it is, the best thing to do is to email each member individually. So there's no possibility that somebody replies all, because I even when you put at the top of the email, do not reply all, do not reply all. I can't tell you how many times it still happens, and then we have to try to put that toothpaste back in the tube for an open meeting law violation. So staff members, I was advised to address each member individually, even though I know it creates more work and it's a bit of a hassle, but it's really the best way to avoid serial communications, walking quorums like we just talked about, because those can happen with discussions that happen in person. Those can be discussions that happen electronically, text, email, in person. It does not matter. Anytime you and a quorum of members are discussing board minutes outside of the public meeting space, we've created a walking quorum, which is an open meeting law violation. And I'll talk about more about some of the potential ramifications of that later on. Next slide, please.
Before we move on, can I ask also?
Yes.
There are specific guidelines around it, but confidential meetings are also allowed when it's a personnel issue, correct?
Okay, yeah. So I do have a slide about this later, but you know what? This is important because I actually just recently saw this misused by one of my board clients, and I was quite disheartened because we've had this training and we knew how this was supposed to be used. So when a board is discussing, I'm trying to remember the exact language the statute uses, but essentially when the character of someone is at issue, and this usually occurs more for the boards that do have licensees and do licensee prosecutions for disciplinary matters. That can come up regularly, but if the character of someone is at issue, that the board has to discuss, and there's extra notice requirements that go along with this, and we don't really need to get into those specifics, but the privilege, I'm sorry, it's not really a privilege. The decision on whether to go to a closed session or not to discuss that person's character, that is up to the person whose character is at issue, not the board. And that's a common mistake that I see is the board thinks they have the ability to say, we're going to move into closed session. It is not the board's discretion. What the board is supposed to do is Sally Smith, who is here to testify and whose character is going to be addressed. You say, Sally Smith, would you like to go into closed session for this matter, or do you want to do it open in the public? And it is up to them whether they want to go into closed session or not. If they say no, and it doesn't really matter how uncomfortable that makes the board members, they're the only ones that have the ability to demand a closed session. So that's a mistake I've seen multiple times recently, and I'm going to have to address with them because some of those boards just think they can unilaterally say, we're just going to go into closed session because they don't want to deal with it. And that's not the way the OML is written. The person whose character is at issue holds the privilege of whether they go into closed session or not. And what closed session means is that the members, any members of the public who are not part of the board, not the board staff, and not the person who is being addressed are removed temporarily during that part of the meeting. So this is a virtual only board. So, if that would happen here, we would just remove all members of the public that aren't the board members, board staff, and the person at issue from the Zoom meeting temporarily, put them in a holding room or something. When the meeting's done in person, they just clear the room of everyone except those groups in the room, and then they address their issue, and then you come back on the record. You don't discuss the details of what was discussed during the closed session, but you do have to discuss if there was any, well, I'm sorry, no action is supposed to be taken during the closed session. So let's say you're addressing someone's character for the purpose of, taking away their license for something or whatnot. And that's obviously not applicable to this board, but just for example purposes. They would not vote and discuss whether to take the license away during the closed session. They would take the testimony, take the facts, then they would go back into open session, and that's when the board members would have their deliberation on whether to take the license or not. So closed session it does not absolve you. When I say you, I mean just board members in general from having open discussions about whatever action the board is going to take. That still has to be done in the open session, not during the closed session. The closed session is just so sensitive topics at the request of the individual at issue can be openly discussed without causing undue, embarrassment, essentially is what it usually comes down to. And so there's also extra notice requirements that go into if you're going to have an agenda item that falls into the discussion of a character of someone. But I don't think I need to get into that for this board because I think it's going to be it'd be pretty unusual for that situation to arise with this kind of board. But just so you have understanding, that's what a closed session involves. And I believe I have a slide on that later on here. So I'll remind you when we get to that point. All right. Compliance with OML. You can go to the next slide, Don. Thank you. I'm not going to go into the nuts and bolts for notices and agendas because that's for the staff to worry about as opposed to the board members. But this is the one area of OML where there are pretty clear black and white, you can do this and you can't do that answers as far as what is required in notice, what is required in agenda. Obviously the important pieces that are in a notice and agenda, the time, place, and location, that has to include any kind of remote technology system, Zoom links, call-in numbers, Teams links, whatever it may be. And that became obviously more common after the COVID era. In fact, the 2003 changes to the OML, they now require if there's a call-in number that call-in number be read out loud prior to the start of the meeting. So, I mean, they're very clear that anyone who's listening or wanting to listen, they need to know how to be able to access the meeting. There's posting requirements for these things. As you can see, there are multiple places they have to be posted. The most important one, especially for a remote board like this one, is that it's on the board's website. There's a few others, but that's the most important one. If it's not on the board's website, we've already messed up, as I would say. The posting has to be done at least 3 business days prior to the meeting. That's also important. If you do not get the notice up before then, we don't have a meeting. As simple as that. Public comment. You have a little bit of wiggle room on how you want to do public comments. The most common Common way is one at the beginning, one at the end, which is, I mean, that's how it's usually done. However, there's nothing that prohibits the board from seeking public comment before individual agenda items if they think that would be more efficient. That's pretty much up to the director and the board chair to figure out how they want to do that. But there has to be at least a open meeting law, or sorry, a public comment section at the beginning and at the end of the meeting. And then let me get into action items real quick because this is another important issue. How something is placed on the agenda, it's not a matter of semantics. It makes a big difference, and it makes a difference how we can approach an item. So even if something is mislabeled on the agenda, we can't just say, oh, it's typo, so we're just going to do something different anyway. And the reason, and what I mean by that is some agenda items are listed as discussion only, right? And that means what it says. That means it is for the board to openly discuss, but there is no action to come from that. If there is going to be discussion and action, it says discussion for possible action is the most common terminology we see. That means we're going to discuss, and there's a possibility the board is going to vote to take some sort of action on that item after the discussion. If it's not listed, if there's no possible action dictation in the agenda, there will be no vote, and there will be no board action on the matter. Even if it was an accidental typo, it does not matter, because the idea is the general public has the right to know what is going to be discussed on a particular meeting, and especially what is the body going to make a decision on? What are they going to do orders on? That is the most important thing. So if something is not labeled as for possible action, then there will be no board vote on it. I really don't care what the reason is. And that upsets some people because they're like, that's inefficient, then we got to put it on to the next meeting. I don't care. It's that's an important thing, because you know what? If I get an open meeting law complaint because that happened, we're probably going to invalidate the action and make you redo it anyway. So we try to review agendas and whatnot before they go out to make sure that there aren't any mistakes like that. Mistakes still happen, but we have to adhere to the agenda, and that goes with topics as well, right? We cannot ad hoc create a new agenda item the day of the meeting ever. And we also have to constrain our discussions to the best extent possible to the topic of what is on the agenda, and not stray into side conversations, side squabbles, that kind of thing. It's harder to put no meeting law violation on that kind of thing, but there's a reasonable mind can figure out when something has strayed too far from the discussion that it was originally intended to be, as noticed on the agenda. So whoever the board counsel is, whether it's a general counsel or it's a DAG, that's one of our responsibilities. This is to keep an eye on the agenda and make sure that what is being discussed in that moment is at least in the ballpark of what the discussion was meant to be, and hasn't gone completely off the rails, because that is an open meeting law violation. Next slide, please. This is an important one, especially for this board. We accommodate persons with physical disabilities as desired. And that can be done by request. That can be done as a matter of course. Public participation and public notice and knowledge, that applies to everyone, regardless of what their disability is, regardless of their comprehension. We always will do our best to accommodate anyone who wants to participate in a public meeting, and that is very important as well. That's not only the quickest way to get in trouble with OML, but sometimes that even invokes federal problems if we don't make ourselves accessible to everyone. Meetings need to be recorded. That's a newer requirement that became a bigger deal after COVID, when most of the boards commissions moved to either a full remote status or a hybrid remote status. That's important for record keeping, which also is the transcription. So what's required, transcription is not actually required. Minutes are required after every public meeting. And that's an important issue. I've had that argument with a few different people, because they say, well, I do transcription, so I don't need to do minutes. That's not true. The law says that a board commission has to do minutes after a public meeting. And that's important because if you have a 5-hour meeting, you really expect a member of the public to listen to the recording or read a 1,000-page transcription of a 5-hour meeting when maybe there was only 2 minutes of that meeting. They're actually interested in knowing what a board discussed and what they voted on. That's why minutes are required, not exactly transcription. I say if you got transcriptions as well, that's great, but what is at least required is minutes and recordings of the meeting. Supporting materials. Let me get into that, and that's probably not as big of an issue with a board like this, but it does come up bigger with other boards. So supporting materials need to be posted and available for the public as soon as they are made available to the board members at the same time. So that's usually done, a few days before the meeting. Also, some people can request advanced copies of meeting materials and be asked to be put on a permanent mailing list for materials. And those people have to be given those materials again, as soon as they're available to the board members. So if they're on that list, they always get the agenda, they always get the supporting materials. They have to make that request, and the request is only good for 6 months. That they have to renew it after that. But some people can make themselves semi-permanent recipients of board materials ahead of time. Emergency meetings. We try to discourage emergency meetings whenever possible because they create logistical problems and budget problems at times for depending on the board or commission. However, if the board needs to take an action, and it's and there could be irreparable harm if it's not done by a particular time, then emergency meetings are a possibility. However, the same rules apply. We have to have at least 3 days notice, has to be a quorum, all the same rules apply. But occasionally a meeting is needed prior to the next scheduled meeting if something is dire or important that needs to be addressed. And I had something else to say, but it's not relevant to this board, so I'll just move on to the next slide, please. Sorry, public comment. So we talked about this before. There are different options on the way you can do it, but the minimum is that there is one at the beginning and one at the end. Time, place, and manner restrictions on public comment. What you can't ever do is restrict public comment by what the content of the comments is, as long as it's within relevance of something the board does or has control over. But we can't say, let's say we're discussing a potential regulation change or something. We can't say we only want to hear public comment for the people who want the regulation change, and we don't want to hear public comment for anyone who doesn't want the regulation change. That would be an unlawful restriction on public comment. Another question I get frequently with public comment is, well, can we have some requirement that they sign up for public comment before the meeting, or that's the most common. Some boards, commissions like to have sign-ups that you have to do prior to the meeting before you can make public comment. That is not allowed under open meeting law, and I've told every single client of mine that's even attempted that they cannot do that. You cannot prevent someone from making a public comment because they didn't go through some sort of registration process prior to the meeting. They can decide right there at the meeting that they want to make a public comment, they have the right to do that. The time, place, and manner restriction is based on, obviously you can't use, we could restrict it if they're using foul language. We can restrict it if they're being abusive. We can restrict it based on time for efficiency purposes. The most common limit is 3 minutes, a comment. Sometimes it can be a little bit less if there's, expected to be hundreds or thousands of comments solicited. Written comments are just as accepted as comments that are made at the meeting. We can't treat those differently. And obviously if the board is remote, then there has to be an option for someone to either be able to access it remotely and make comment, via Zoom or call in, something of the matter. I can give you, example. I was helping the pharmacy board out one time, and they had some technical issues where they could not get the Zoom link would not work for anyone that did not have a board email or something to that effect. Very strange. So the public could not access the Zoom, but they were able to. They had a phone line available that was listed on the agenda. So we had the phone line going. People were still able to call in and give public comment. So for that reason, we were able to continue with the meeting. But if we didn't have that, we wouldn't have been able to continue with the meeting. It's that important. Next slide, please. All right, closed session, and here's the language I was talking about earlier: character, alleged misconduct, professional competence, physical or mental health of a person. Those are the situations that if there is a agenda item where any of those items are going to be at issue for a person, they have the opportunity to ask to say if they want it to be in closed session or if they want it to be done open in the public. And again, that privilege lies with the person who's being discussed, not the board. And there are some exceptions to that, but you guys don't need to worry yourself with that. And as I said before, the action will still occur during the public meeting. So there's that. Virtual attendance. This is important because of the 2003 changes. If we allow any members of a board or commission to participate remotely, we have to offer that same access to members of the public. That was a big change in 2003. So if we have a hybrid board where some people are meeting in person and some people are there remotely, then the general public has to have a remote access option as well. If a meeting is entirely in person, every board member is in a room together, we do not necessarily have to offer a remote option. So it's just a matter of leveling the playing field so the public has the same access as the board members. That was an important change in 2003. Next slide, please. Okay, so what happens when OML is violated? We have, when I say, a matter, an agenda item can be, a decision on an agenda item can be reversed and remanded back to the board or commission. That's kind of our most extreme solution for an OML violation. We don't do that very often, mostly because the logistical nightmare that it creates just ends up harming the taxpayers and the people who rely on the board or commission anyway. So we really don't like to take that option. The most common corrective action is honestly a letter of reprimand, where we just issue a public letter saying, board, you didn't do this right. This is a violation of open meeting law. Don't do it again. But it's embarrassing. And I, at least for my boards and clients that I represent, I take them staying within compliance with open meeting law personally. And I put a lot of time and effort into that because I really do. Open meeting law is so important. It really is. And some people see it as a hindrance, as a, just a pain in the butt. I really try to think about it from the perspective of the general public whose hard-earned tax money goes to pay for a lot of the things that we get the privilege to do, and therefore they have just as much stake in anything that we're doing as anyone else. And so I really try to always think about it through that perspective and not see open meeting law as something to be, skirted around or just try to figure out a way through it. I really do try to encourage my boards commissions to be as thorough and transparent as possible, because nobody should ever be deprived of their ability to participate in their state government because of a board that is not interested in complying with the open meeting law. Next slide, please. Conflicts. Let's get into this one. The way I see it, and this is the way I try to explain to people when they come to me and say, is this particular situation a conflict of interest? There are 3 levels of conflicts of interest the way I see it. There are absolute no-goes, what I mean by that is absolute scenarios where you have to recuse yourself. There's no possibility you can continue on a matter. Good example of that would be your spouse is the director of some entity that the board is gonna decide some sort of action on. I mean, that direct. Or you are employed with whatever entity is up for issue before a board or commission. Those are no possibility. You have to recuse yourself. Not recusing yourself would be a direct open meeting law violation. And those have more significant consequences than your garden variety open meeting law open meeting law violation. Some NRSs even have semi-criminal penalties for doing that kind of thing. It's kind of self-dealing, by not recusing yourself type of thing. There's a second category of conflicts where I would say they're potential conflicts, but they're not enough that you mandatorily have to recuse yourself. It's kind of discretionary. And when I say discretionary, at your best discretion, and really think about it, before you make that decision. I'm trying to think of a good example of a discretionary conflict. I'll give you one. Let's say the person testifying before the board that's going to issue a decision on, let's say they were your college roommate 20 years ago. Like you're not really close now, but you did once formally have a personal relationship with the person. That's the kind of conflict that you need to disclose on the record. But you also get to use your discretion whether you want to continue hearing the matter or if you want to recuse yourself. But you have to announce it on the record, and not announcing on the record if someone finds out later on. That's a huge problem and could get the matter remanded and everything else. So, let's say you decide you think you can still hear the matter objectively, then that's what you need to say on the record. I need to make an announcement. The person testifying before us was my former college roommate 20 years ago. We were formerly very close friends, not so much in recent times, but I want to disclose the nature of the relationship, and I still believe I can rule on this matter objectively and fairly, and then we move on. Usually no issue there. But the most important part is that you still announce that there is an appearance of a potential conflict on the record. That's important. And then the last category is there's no conflict whatsoever, and you don't have to announce anything. You definitely don't have to recuse yourself. The connection between you and whoever the board is hearing is so remote in time or place that no reasonable person would take it as their appearance of a conflict between your role on the board and your role in your personal life. So those are kind of how I categorize potential conflicts. Next slide, please. And this is just more detail for what we just discussed. And this is the categories of mandatory disclosure of a potential conflict. A substantial pecuniary interest, to me, that's a mandatory recusal. Any time where your the personal relationship or the professional relationship, whatever it may be, any reasonable person would assume that you would not be able to fairly and objectively rule on a matter based on the nature of that connection. That is a mandatory recusal, and this goes into more details for those situations when they come up. And then the situations where abstention is required versus where abstention is a little bit more discretionary. What I always advise, and because most people say, well, it's not really clear to me. I don't know. I'm not a lawyer. I don't really know when my connection to the thing that we're going to be hearing is too close for, and what if it's mandatory abstention versus discretionary abstention. Lean on us as the legal advisors to help you with that issue. Make sure you're aware of an agenda before the meeting starts. Take a look at it closely. If you see anything on that agenda that you're like, hey, that could be problematic because of XYZ relationship I have or formerly had, contact Dawn, contact someone on the board staff and say, hey, I have a question about a potential conflict. Can I get the DAG's number or the attorney's number so I can discuss that with them and they can advise me on whether, what kind of conflict this may or may not be. Let us help you make that decision. Nobody's expecting nobody expects non-attorneys to be able to say with absolute certainty that is or isn't a potentially unlawful conflict of interest or not. So let us help you, lean on us. We can absolutely provide that advice, which most of the time is going to be, this is definitely a thing you should announce on the record, but it's kind of up to you whether you think you can still discretionary matter rule on the matter fairly and objectively. Because at the end of the day, that's what you're asked to do as board members. That's what you're required to do as board members. And if anything is going to conflict with that, then we need to discuss it and we need to figure out what the proper avenue for addressing that is. Final note on conflicts: if you're conflicted out and you recuse yourself, that does reduce the quorum. So that's obviously a problem if you are the member that gives us quorum and you cannot rule on a matter because you have to abstain, then honestly we really can't hear the matter at all, and we have to continue it for a future meeting and hope that we have additional numbers that we can still hear the matter after you've recused yourself. So that's something to consider as well. That should not stop you from recusing yourself if you need to. That is the most important thing, but it's just, and that's more for the director and us to consider things like that, if and when they arise. Next slide, please. So these were the most recent significant changes that were made to the OML in 2023. They did slightly amend the definition of quorum to the point that only voting members now count to the quorum. Previously, everyone on the board or commission was part of quorum. Now they've reduced it, or they've revised it to be only the voting members. So I always say that part of being a board commission staff member, it's very math heavy. You really have to do some math and figure out what the quorum number is, and make sure that you're only considering voting members. And that's why if you have to abstain from a matter because of a conflict, you're not counted as part of quorum anymore. And vacancies obviously do not count as quorum either. If we have open spots that have not been filled by the governor on the board or commission, we have to still have a quorum based on who we still have. And it's really just a math thing for staff to consider, but we cannot even start a meeting if we do not have quorum. So I've had some people say, well, can't we just start a meeting and then we won't take any board action, but we'll do discussion items only if we don't have a quorum? No, the meeting cannot even start unless we have a quorum of members. So it doesn't matter if it's discussion and action items. We can't do any of that unless we can't even have the first public comment part of it if we don't have a quorum of members. And then meeting definitions, we already just discussed that. Attorney-client conferences, really the only major exemption from what is a meeting. That's the only time we can have a quorum of members get together and discuss board business without there being potential OML violation. Some people think that we should be able to have like pre-meeting primers before a meeting, and I have some boards commissions say, well, that used to be okay, why can't we do that? And I'm telling you can't do that because that's a meeting. And just me or the attorney being present at that meeting, if it's not an actual legal briefing, does not exempt that group from an OML violation. So anytime we're talking about getting together to discuss board business, it either needs to be during a public meeting or there has to be a legitimate litigation legal briefing that the attorney has to deliver for that not to be under open meeting law. We don't need to talk about administrative actions because I don't think this board does any of that, but there are special notices and requirements if there's going to be what we call a contested case under NRS 233B. And if you guys have any questions about that, I can address that, but I don't think that's really relevant to this body. And there's the notice requirements for individuals under that. You have to let them know certain days in advance that they're either a property right is going to be addressed, or them in particular for those categories that we talked about with closed sessions are going to be addressed. That's all important. I think that's good for that one. Next slide, please. Oh, do we miss one? Okay. Very quickly. So if you have a multi-day meeting, each day of the meeting, as you guys are doing here, and you did perfectly, still requires that you do the public comment section before and after. It doesn't matter if it's a continuation of the meeting the day before. Anytime you close it, you can reopen it. You still have to have another public comment before and after. We talked about agenda posting location, so I'm not going to go into that again. Contested case under 233B is what we were just talking about. That comes up when you are talking about taking away a property right or a privilege right. Most often we see that with professional boards that have licenses. Anytime you're talking about taking discipline against a licensee or taking a licensee's license, you have to go through this what we call contested case procedure under 233B. But I won't go through that if anyone has any questions about that, because it's not really relevant to this board. And then we've talked about public comment, so we can go ahead to the last slide. And these are some links. Our Attorney General's open meeting law manual is pretty good. You can get a lot of information out of that, and a lot of the more basic questions will be answered in that kind of manual. However, open meeting law is it's a fickle part of the law, and it's a lot of the questions cannot be answered within the manual because they're very fact specific circumstances at issue that change the analysis. So anytime you have an open meeting law question, take it to the director first. And then if they need to elevate it up to us for legal advice, that's what they will do. But don't ever shy away from asking an open meeting law question or concern, because it's not easy and it's not overly simplified. It's not meant to be. And these kind of questions do come up. So take advantage of the resources that we have available, but if you feel like your question is not being answered in like the Attorney General's open meeting law manual, please take it to us. That's what we're here for, and that's what we like to do. I actually thoroughly enjoy open meeting law because it's a little bit different every single day. There's always new questions and issues to be looked at. No two open meeting law questions are ever the same. And the only other warning I'll give about open meeting law in general is that it's a fluid piece of law. And what is our interpretation and understanding one day may not always be it may not always be that way. With subcommittees, like in particular, and I realized I thought I had a subcommittee slide and just now realized I don't. So if anyone has subcommittee questions, I'll go into that. But like subcommittees in particular, that's an area that we have changed our interpretation understanding of a couple times over the last couple decades. It's even though the NRS hasn't changed on that issue, our understanding, I mean the Attorney General, our Attorney General understanding of subcommittees and what they can do has evolved over the last couple decades. So that kind of thing can't happen. So, check back for updates. We always try to issue things when there are major updates in the open meeting law or when we change our previous interpretation of major parts of the open meeting law. But just be aware that the resources can and do change, and no part of the open meeting law is free from a change in interpretation as things move along. So I think that's all I have slide wise. I will open it up for questions at this time from anyone that has that.
It looks like, this is Dawn Lyons. It looks like someone had a question in the chat. Says, what if you lose quorum during meeting? Do you have to stop the meeting? Can you ask this for me?
Yes, and yes, you do. The minute quorum is lost, regardless of the reason, the meeting has to stop. You cannot continue. It doesn't matter if you had quorum when you started the meeting. And then if you lose it as it's going on, that stops the meeting. And I've only seen that happen a couple times, and usually it's because of something very unexpected. Somebody had a medical emergency at one point. Someone had a school emergency with their child, and they had to leave right then and there. They could not continue. We did have to stop the meeting and continue it for a future date. That can and does happen. But the important thing to remember is that we have to have quorum at every stage of the meeting for it to continue. Start, middle, and end. We still have to have quorum. Otherwise, everything stops and we have to continue it for a later date. And the reason for that, and if you look at any board or commission's specific statutes, you will see, the board can, or the board may, or the board shall. When we interpret the board, that means a quorum of the board during a public meeting only. That is the only time a board can meet. That is the only time a board can make actions that are consistent with what their powers are in law, is if there's a quorum and they're doing it through the proper process in a public open meeting. Otherwise, there is no board, there is no commission, and there is no official action from the board or commission.
Are there any more questions for Mr. Weiss while we have him here?
Oh, come on, guys. There's no way I was that clear in my presentation. Come on.
Well, I'm
Well,
not.
and that's okay. If no, oh, we do have a question. All right.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, okay, sorry. Sorry, are you calling on me, Obiama, or no?
Yes, you, Abiyama.
Oh, okay, perfect. Thank you so much. So, Obiama, for the record, thank you so much for describing everything for me. This is really, for the open meeting law. It's a big thing that we really need to be, we've known about for a long time. And so I'm a representative here for this commission, on this council, for the deaf and hard of hearing part for this council. So I'm also involved in another commission as well for the deaf and hard of hearing community. So I wanted to know if this will be available for like visibility, like this recording, for that committee to be able to see.
So this is Dawn Lyons. I can answer that for you, Obioma. I actually will be posting that on our YouTube channel, this whole meeting. It won't be separated out into the specific presentation, but you can always, move the cursor to that section and just listen to that part of it if you want to. And I'll send you that link. I'll make sure that link's on our website.
And Don, you have my
Thank you so
permission
much.
to, oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt. Sorry.
Sorry, no, you're good.
You're free to post this PowerPoint to the meeting materials as well if you would like. That way it's there for anyone who needs to see it. There's nothing special about what I have here. I mean, all this comes directly from what's in statute and our Attorney General opinions on open meeting law. So nothing proprietary here. You are free to post this PowerPoint to the materials if need be, and that way anyone can refer to it anytime they need.
Sounds good. I'll put that link in the chat too. Oh, Obioma, did you have another question?
I just wanted to add, yeah, again, Obiama, for the record. So again, this is wonderful. Thank you so much, Dawn, for making this available for us to be able to watch later. I really appreciate that. And then just want to make sure if the interpreters are visible for that too, if you don't mind, that would be great. That way, so when we do watch the recording again, just because, we can, if it's not just a PowerPoint, it won't be enough for our deaf and hard of hearing community.
Yes, this is Dawn Lyons, Obioma. The interpreters are always pinned to the top of the screen, so during our entire meeting, anyone watching it or reviewing can see them.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Don, I believe the meeting is transcribed as well. Am I wrong?
No, that's correct. We do have the transcription of the entire meeting, and we get those pretty quickly too, and can send those out to anyone who needs them.
Perfect.
Perfect. Thank you again for that transcript. And again, I get English is our second language for us. So having the signing, that's what's really great for us. So that's beautiful, but we really appreciate having all the access for us.
Okay, and I just posted the link to our meeting on our webpage in the chat. So if you need any of the materials from today, you can access it from that link. Is there any other questions? Well, I want to personally thank you, Mr. Weiss, for spending the time with us today and explaining those things and answering our questions. It was really valuable information. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. I'm happy to help. And if anyone has questions later on, because that happens sometimes with these trainings, and then in the dark of the night, they have a question that comes up and they want it answered. I'm always available for phone calls, emails, whatever you need. The open meeting law is our baby here, and we are happy to help anyone whoever has a question about it anytime, even if it's outside the public meeting space. So thank you for having me, and I'm always here as a resource if need be. Thank you very much.
Evander, this is Dawn Lyons. I'm wondering if now would be a good time to take a 10-minute break.
I think that this will be a perfect time for a 10-minute break. All right, guys, we're going to be on break for 10 minutes. What time is it now, Don?
It is 2:21.
Okay, see you guys back here at 2:31. All right, welcome back, everyone. Don, do we still have quorum?
Let me just take a quick look. We have Linda, you, Sabra, and Peter. So yes, we do.
All right, great. So let's move on to the next item, which is, what is that? We are 11? Did we skip? It was 10 or 11?
It is 11. Would you like me to read it?
I will.
Discussion and make possible recommendations to draft a letter to the National Organization for Statewide Independent Living Councils, or NASILC, regarding developing a proposal to change current independent living language, including the use of the term, quote, consumer, unquote, to the Administration for Community Living, or ACL. Now,
All right.
if you guys remember, we had moved this agenda item to this next meeting from the last meeting, just so we could discuss it further. Let me see if John has joined us. I know I've asked him to, he's not here yet. So I'm going to go ahead and I did post a material that John sent to describe why we use the word consumer. It was posted in the Independence Now. Oh, here he comes. But I'll go ahead and read that letter first. It says, why do we use the word consumer? A question we get frequently from individuals to whom language matters is, what do you call the people you serve? At Centers for Independent Living, we call the people we serve consumers. You might have wondered why. Where does that come from? The term consumer is used by CILs because it clearly shows the person receiving services has control over the process and is making all the decisions. Similar to when shopping for an item where you choose the color, size, and style, at a CIL, you are a consumer of services and have choice and control over those services. Part of the foundation of independent living, or IL philosophy, was the movement away from the traditional medical model where professionals made the decisions to a paradigm of empowerment by people with disabilities to identify what is needed and direct how services are provided. Consumers exercising control over the choices and options of goods and services available to them is the basis of independent living philosophy. The technical assistance provider for CILs, Independent Living Research Utilization, or ILRU, says this about using the word consumer. Quote,
Many CILs were founded during a time when consumer awareness was becoming important to various advocates in our country. Leaders in the IL movement sought a term that would reflect how empowered people participate fully in the decisions that affect their lives. The term consumer was seen as connoting a personal control and awareness and was adopted widely among CILs, unquote. In closing, the words of Judy Heumann, quote, independent living is not doing things by yourself. It is being in control of how things are done, unquote. So thanks, John, for providing that section of from the Independent about the word consumer and why we use it in independent living and where it originated from. That is exactly what we were trying to understand at the last meeting, and I didn't have that available. So I really appreciate you providing that, because you are a wealth of information on the history of independent living. So I appreciate you being here and just being present during this discussion in case anyone else has questions or would like to discuss more about it, or just talk about it in general. So I know there were a couple people who thought the word consumer didn't sound good, and they thought we should change it. And of course, that would have to start at the federal level. So we would have to go through the right channels to do that if we wanted to request that. If we feel strongly that it is a negatory or negative term, and we'd rather, see it expressed in another way for some reason. Now that that history was given on it and the reasoning behind it, does it make more sense? Or do some of you still feel like it might be a negative term or just not as positive as it could be? Does anyone have any thoughts on that?
This is Linda Vejvoda for the record, VEJVODA. I was, quote unquote, a consumer. I don't like that term because what was given to me was resources, and I didn't consume anything from ICL or from the RCIL. And this is the discussion I had with Dee Dee. I go, I don't feel like I'm a consumer because I didn't consume anything from you. I just received resources to get where I needed to be. And so we had a discussion on that, and I don't understand. I understand where it came from. I appreciate where it came from. But if you talk to anybody that is going in, they associate it with, well, I didn't buy anything. I didn't take anything from you guys. You gave it to me freely. It was a free resource. So that's the issue I have. I understand where consumer comes from. I really understand where it's coming from. But at the same time, when you call somebody a consumer that are, for instance, we dealt with a lot of, when I was working for RCIL, we dealt with a lot of homeless. So they were like, I'm not a consumer. I'm not taking nothing from you, or I'm not buying anything from you. So they had issues with that. And so that's what I'm relating to. Why can't we use another word or another type of word that would associate to the people that are using the resources or taking the resources and using them accordingly? That's my opinion, but I understand where it comes from. And Judy Heumann, I applaud her for all of her efforts and her diligence when she was here with us. And I believe she still is here with us because she's guiding us every way. But for all of the efforts that were going into it, I still don't, it just kind of bothers me being called a consumer. because it's a statistical thing, and I just don't agree with it.
So, and I totally respect that. I can understand how you feel about it as well. You know, if I went somewhere to ask for, you know, an independent living plan and they said I was a consumer because of that, it would probably confuse me as well. But I do understand why they use that term. Is there another term that you think would better describe choice and control for people who as the primary purpose?
I have been thinking that over and over and over, and it's just like, you know, I can go through the dictionary and probably find something else, but honestly, to tell you, I don't know what would be fitting. Um, uh, we are people. Uh, we are all people in this world, and you know, every category of person is out there. So I understand where consumer comes from and why it needs to be that way. But I feel that because we are an independent, we lead for independent and individuality in our facets of what we do every day for people. And we try to legalize, we try to give a lot of get a lot of laws passed, or be identified as individuals that want independence and be recognized that we are who we are. So I don't know. I'm just as baffled for a word to use. I don't really think that there is a category, but consumer seems to be the biggest thing out there right now. So I don't know if there's anybody else that has some kind of lead as to what can be given. I'll be more than glad to hash it over too. Um, but being out there and then being called a consumer, it just, you know, I didn't go to a grocery store and purchase something. I came to seek out information, and seeking out information is totally different than buying into something.
So, oh, wait, let me see what's in the chat real quick.
And I don't mean to monopolize. I know that my 3 minutes are over. I apologize.
So Ashley, you're allowed to talk. You're one of our members and you're welcome to join in, but I can read your chat if you want me to. She put in the chat, would consumers or resources or consumers of services be a better fit? And that's a really good point, Ashley. You know, I was actually thinking while Linda was talking about maybe it's an issue of the explanation while you're using that term to people who have never heard it before. It's a matter of educating people properly on where that actually comes from and why we use it. And maybe if we did a better job of that when we use the term to begin with people, that they wouldn't take it in such a negative way and they would understand better. John, you have your hand raised.
Just if you're taking public comment during this, I don't know if that's John.
Is it okay if the if John speaks on this?
I agree. Yeah, go for it, John.
Right. So this isn't the first time this conversation's happened. Many years ago, when I remember this conversation coming up with the SILC of there, an individual had an opinion that consumer was a negative term because they were consuming this service, and I think it's interesting in having the conversation because our perceptions are important, and how we feel that is perceived, or if we had a negative reaction to consumer of services. My name's John. If I'm a consumer, and that's what our consumers are should be addressed as the people that are our peers and so on and so forth. Consumer is just a term to me. Yes, as a consumer, I do feel empowered when especially when I read it put into this language as I am in charge. I'm the buyer. I can choose if I want to develop an independent living goal or I don't. And I get to choose what that goal says, what steps need to be taken, so on and so forth. So I see that language and I go, okay, I identify with it, but I don't call my consumer. I call them by their name. And I think in my mind, independent living has just gotten away from talking to consumers and letting them know this consumer name is a position of power. This is, we own these services. The personal care attendant services don't exist for people that don't receive those services. It's not for administrators to make decisions on how those services are provided. We are the people that should be at the table, right? That's just my opinion. I would like to hear more people's opinions of it because I think that negative or positive, however that comes out, finding a word is just a word, right? Whether I hear people call clients, I've used client and consumer interactively because I think of a client as the person in control. If they're my client, they're paying me, that right? They have me at the table so that I can serve them. So perceptions. Thank you.
Dawn, this is Peter Whittingham.
Yeah, go ahead, Peter.
And so, I decided not to maybe advance an argument. Remember, I think I was one of the first to have raised the concern some time ago. It was based upon the general way the term consumer is used when we are talking about our service population, who are persons diagnosed with disabilities. And as you look at all of the documents, that was my thoughts at the time, as you look at all the documents pertaining to the SILC, there are different terms that are used to define who we are and what we do, and it's always specific to persons with disability. And my thoughts at the time was that the broad term consumer, or the term consumer, is so broad that it may be construed to include just about everybody. And since we are an organization, an advocate organization for persons with disability, I thought it would be good to consider using a term that is specific to our service population. The conversation has gone different ways, and to the point where we're now, it sounds as if there is a case where if we need to change it, we have to go through state or federal body, and the challenges to do that. And one of the points you mentioned was whether or not we feel so strongly about it, but because if we do, we have to do this and take these steps. It's not a case that I don't feel strongly about it, but I think there may be other areas that we can focus our attention on. But I want to agree with I want to mention her name. Who spoke before me?
Linda.
I'm sorry? Linda. Yeah, I want to tell you, Linda, I agree, and others as well. I think, in fact, Dee Dee had joined in the conversation at the time about the applicability of the term. And the mere fact that it was used then and originated then, and so much has happened since then in terms of sensitivity to language and how it applies, especially to our group, and a need to be sensitive to that. There are a number of conversations and studies done in terms of now terms that we had considered normal, except that now it is frowned upon by the majority. And as John mentioned, even the term client, which seems so innocent, innocuous, but no, it's not accepted in terms of how we're referencing our service population. So my thoughts are that that we may need to take a look at it, take out the emotions, and whether we are tied to history because of history, how it applies. I remember as a Black American, long ago, the term Negro was very much accepted, and that was how it was used to describe a group of people. included myself. There are good reasons why we don't use the word Negro anymore, in spite of how much it applied back then and why it was used. And that's just maybe an extreme example for this conversation. But I just think that the term consumer, as it is used, regardless of the preference for any of us and how much we're tied to its origin, I think there's a good argument to be made that it's too general in its use application, especially when we're referring to our service population made up of persons with disability.
Thank you, Peter. This is Dawn Lyons. Actually, you made several good points that are definitely worth talking about or considering. The one thing that I heard you say loud and clear is that, and I think we're all all in favor of progress if it's for the benefit of everybody, right? I don't think that's necessarily something that anybody is opposed to, but one thing you mentioned was that, it should be more specific to our population. And I think if you take a look at independent living and the independent living philosophy and what it really stands for, is, independent living is integration. It's not separating ourselves into a certain category, right? So in that essence, it almost sounds like an argument for the word consumer being broad because it covers everybody, because we don't know what individuals have what disabilities and what that looks like. So it's also it encompasses and it's inclusive in a sort of a way. You know what I mean? But
no,
that's just my thought.
This is Linda Vivoda again for the record. Also, when I was working for RCIL, if you mentioned, well, you're disabled to some of the people that I worked with, they took offense to that too. No, I'm not disabled. So I didn't look at myself as disabled because I had worked so hard to be where I was at. But I have a lot of physical disabilities, and now I have a TBI and some other things going on. So I don't know if the word and disability categorizes a lot of people too. But that's why I'm saying this has got to be really looked at and kind of talked about and understood a little bit better, because Peter, you're right. It's a wide, vast majority that if you say consumer, it means everyone in a whole. And that's why I had issues with that word, is because it covers everybody. It's not one individuality thing. It is everybody. It's a broad spectrum of a word. And I think because of that, it does not zoom in on the fact that we are disabled, and we are a community of disabled that are trying to not only improve our lives, but to also have the resources there to be able to have a betterment of it. And we haven't come this far just to argue over a word, but it is a word that causes some havoc amongst the people that are individuals with disabilities.
Well, and this is Dawn Lyons again. Linda, I would say, I don't really look at this as having an argument over whether or not it's acceptable. I look at it as a discussion as to how we look at the word itself and how we feel about it and what kind of changes might be better or might be something that we're interested in pursuing.
I'm sorry. Wrong language.
No, that's okay. I just want to, so sometimes semantics matter, and I don't want us to feel like we're arguing over it, because I don't feel like we're at a difference of opinion necessarily on it, as much as I feel like it's something that we need to all be on the same page about, really.
This is Dee Dee Formaster for the record. I think that some words need to go by the wayside, and other words need to replace it. But the question is, what is the other word? So that's what I think we need to really think about. What word would fit in there besides consumer? You know, client, may or may not work. But, we need something that kind of represents the fact that that person who is there getting resources is in control and is always in control because it's their lives. It's like I always say to my clients, this is your life, not mine. And you need to make choices about your life. And so maybe we need to, I don't mean to say maybe we need to put it off again, but maybe we need to put it off again to think about what words we could use. Because if we are going to do this and leave that word behind us, then we need to find another word to replace it.
This is Peter Whittingham. Just to a footnote to Dee Dee's comments. I would agree, based upon the sentiments expressed thus far, that it should be considered to put this forward. And instead of making a motion on this, I'm going to suggest that maybe for our next meeting, we invite an individual. In fact, I remember attending a conference, and there was one of the presentation at the conference was, forgot her name. She is from Northern Nevada, and so many of you may know who I'm talking about. But the subject of that presentation was about acceptable term being used as it applies to the disability community. And so many, in fact, in that meeting, I remembered so many people thinking, oh, I didn't say anything wrong with that. But okay, now I am informed. And now this is very informative for me. And I will resist from using that term. And she had a laundry list of terms that seemingly acceptable to all until people take a closer look. And so I think, one, we can, and give me time, I will identify the name and credentials of that person to invite to our next meeting to present. Or two, I make a motion that we put a subcommittee together to come up with a particular term that is suited and can be adopted by this council as the acceptable term to be used when referencing our service population.
Sabra, you had your hand up.
Thank you. Sabra McWhorter Clark for the record. I was just going to add that I've always liked the term participant. I know that in my many years of working in the IL program, when someone in the community wanted to work on developing an independent living plan, with me, their participation was key, and that would be the first thing that I would say to them. Not only what is important to you and what would you like to do, what has worked or not worked for you in the past, or what you would like to explore. But also, you will participate in the program to the extent that you can. I'll have my part, you'll have your part, and then we'll get things done. So that's just my 2 cents on the terminology.
Somewhere you might have just come up with the correct term to use, and that is generally applicable. So thanks.
This is Havana Davis for the record. So for what I'm understanding is, I don't think we have to make a motion for the subcommittee. What I'm thinking is that at the same time, we all feel strongly about what words should be used, and I think that's a great idea. That sorry, they started talking in my ear, but I see that we all feel strongly about what terminology should be used. I think that Peter had a great idea by talking about getting someone to present at our next meeting about terminology, things like that. Don, I think that you should get someone from our what is that, the IL network, who is very knowledgeable on the terms that they use, why they use them. Because you all have to remember that if we do decide that we want to make that change, we have to go through the proper channels to make that change. So I want you all to be sure that you all understand that part, and that's what we're here for. If that's what you guys want as a committee, then that's what we're going to do. We're going to go through those steps, and we're going to try and get that word changed. But at the same time, we have to do some more research. We have to have some more ideas. People do need to come up with words that they think fit better, and I think that will be something that we're not going to be able to take care of today. So we definitely need to arrange those different things, and the things that we just mentioned. Somebody to present, somebody some words that we think fit better, and we can revisit this. So this might have to be a standing agenda item until we can get to the point where we are comfortable and ready to send that letter to the federal government, or to the people who make those changes.
This is Dawn Lyons. Evander, may I?
Yes.
It's something I wanted to say. I personally want to ensure that we don't end up embarrassing ourselves necessarily by asking for something just because we don't fully understand it. That's the reason why I brought John's comment into this, and why we invited John to speak on it, because he really has a really good history and background in independent living and the independent living philosophy, and where those terms came from. And that's why he provided us with that information. But I also I want to make sure that we absolutely understand it. Ed Roberts, the father of independent living, as we called him, he said if he could go back, he would change the term to interdependent living. It didn't change the term independent living. And there's a lot of people who misunderstand that term. And that's an argument that we could take up as well. Maybe we should change it to interdependent living and petition the federal government to change the act. But it's eventually going to have to be something that we really, really thoroughly make sure we understand before we request a change to it. I think it's really important that we totally understand all the implications of that in order to make an educated determination, even on another term. So, another thing I wanted to say was, we have Mary Evilsizer here as well, and she is another CIL director, and she's been in independent living for a long time. I wonder if, Mary, you have any information or an opinion on this that you would mind sharing with us.
Thank you, Don. I'm sorry, I was away from the screen for a minute. And so I'm sorry I missed John's presentation, but I had written in the chat, and my recommendation is perhaps the SILC could consider that the funding for the SILC, the State Independent Living Council, and the funding for the accredited Centers for Independent Living comes from the Administration for Community Living, which is an offshoot of what the father of our movement, Ed Roberts, had started many years ago. In the beginning, when the independent living movement began, terminology was important then as it is now. And our founding fathers did end up selecting the word consumer. Why did they select the word consumer? Voc Rehab, and that's Dieter, the Department of Education, Training, and Rehabilitation, they use the word client. They provide services to their clients. Professional doctors provide services to their patients. When the independent living movement started, individuals with disabilities did not want to be seen as either the client or the patient. They wanted to be someone who had the option, the choice, and the right to make the decision to consume the services offered by Centers for Independent Living. That's how the term consumer, I believe, for many years back, that's how it started in the independent living movement. But up for consideration at this time also is that we are all funded by, under the Department of Health and Human Services, the Administration for Community Living. The terminology that comes with our funds, the grants, is consumer. So by our SILC saying we would like to change the word consumer, I think you're so brilliant, Havander, in saying let's look at the root source of this. We want to change the word. We want to be called something different in Nevada. That may be so, but our funding will continue to come with the word consumer. So I think if we want to change it, what we have to do is unite with all the SILCs in the United States, unite with all the Centers for Independent Living in the United States, because Don, you brought up a very valid point. We don't want to embarrass ourselves. If we come up with a new term and we say, well, in Nevada, we may get funding from you, but we want to be called this. So who do we petition? Where do we go? And all of this is founded, if you go way back to the Rehab Act that was amended in 1970 and then amended again in July of 2015 as WIOA. So there's a big history and there's a big root. It is a little word, but it's the word that was chosen and the word that we've used, gosh, since the 70s. So I would caution the SILC to move wisely should they decide to want to change the verbiage, and then also to please consult with the Centers for Independent Living that are accredited and getting the funding. That's going to be a hard, we are up to the challenge. We are never beyond challenging our funding sources, but it's going to be a hard move. If we're going to challenge our funding source for a word on what our population chooses to call itself, I could see many worthier challenges we could take up, like we're all underfunded. How do we handle that? If we're going to take on the big boys, let's take them on for a really strong, good cause where all Centers for Independent Living are funded appropriately. That's my 2 cents worth. I appreciate what's going on. I appreciate that many of our wonderful, wonderful volunteers that serve on the SILC haven't grown up with the movement. It's the independent living movement, the independent living philosophy, where we want all individuals with a disability to have we're asking for an equal chance. Just let us be part. Let us be part of society. Let society understand who we are. We just are asking for that. But the word that we've chosen is consumers. So that's my 2 cents worth. Thanks, Don, and Havander for letting me speak.
Don, this is Peter. As maybe my final comment on this, and in line with the suggestion that Vanda made, that I can identify the subject matter expert who spoke at the conference that I referenced. And I think she has a doctorate as well. I don't remember the name, but I will research that particular conference, identify who it is, and make a recommendation that she attend our next meeting with a view of educating us in terms of language and its impact, and then we can make a decision whether or not we can take that take on that battle, if it is a battle at all, for a recommendation. And I must say, Mary, I would hope that the fact that we have a recommendation of another word to use in describing our service population would not by itself affect the funding for what we do or any conversation at the level. I'm hoping, but I think my final comment is that we can identify who I was referencing and have that person present to us at our next meeting.
Fair enough, Peter. It's a new era, a new group, but I think with those of us rooted in the history of the independent living, I think we were open to consideration, but consumer seems to have worked for all 50 states, the American territories, Guam, Samoa, and Puerto Rico, because we're all involved and we're all tied in to the same language. And then, so as Centers for Independent Living, we do have, we unite on what we do. So it is worthy to bring in outside speakers. And if we do want to make a change, it's worthy of us to maybe do a proposal to do a presentation, perhaps at the national conference, and, start tying in to perhaps, maybe we need a national vote again. Maybe it's time we rebrand and refresh ourselves. You never know. But and Peter, with all due respect and all regard for everyone, it's a movement that we've fought so hard just to get to the point where we are. So we're not resisting change. I think we would accept it, but again, with Centers for Independent Living, we move as one unit forward. We communicate on just about all that we do, and just like with the SILCs, with the SILC conference. So thank you very much. And we hope you can identify this professional, and I'm sure ACL probably has professionals that can speak to it as well. Thank you.
Yeah, if I may, it was somebody, and I just saw in the chat, was it from the National Nevada Government Council on Developmental Disability? Yes, it was at that conference that we attended in Reno, and that was one of the breakout sessions.
So Peter, I was also going to mention that there are several items in the chat I'd like to share, just so everyone is aware of them. I know that the DD Council is also considering a change for the term self-advocate, and that was mentioned in the chat. Ashley Price mentioned that Dr. Felicia Rutledge may have been the person that you were interested in having speak. And John put in the chat, if we are not describing to the person we are working with why we using the term, working with why the term consumer is used in IL, then it's just a word. This can be a word that one person finds offensive and another person sees as a position of strength. The point is that the person should know that it is intended to put the individual in a position of control and not in the position of being directed like a patient, which leads back to what I said about educating properly. But and then let's see. Yeah, and then you put in the chat that it was someone from the NGCDD conference. And so, one thing, I know Havander thought it was a good idea that we have that person or someone from the IL community come and speak, someone from independent living who has the expertise on independent living itself and the history, and to come in and speak on the term and, the terminology used in our movement. And I think it's a good idea, probably, to have, it might be a good idea anyway, to have both this other person with a PhD on language in general come and speak, and maybe someone from ACL come and speak, so that we have all of the experts available to give us all of the information so that we can move forward in confidence. Because like I said before, and like Mary was mentioning, this is something, and that's a wonderful idea, Mary, if we do decide to move forward with really asking for a change, a workshop at one of the nickel conferences or at SILC Congress would be the appropriate place to start, I would think. And so that's something we could consider, organizing if that was the case. But Havander, would it be an appropriate thing for me to do is to ask someone from ACL while Peter asks whoever it was, if Ashley Price had the name right, Dr. Felicia Rutledge, for him to ask her to present at our next meeting, and we'll have them both present on that information and maybe have a discussion after that. Would that be appropriate from here?
Amanda Davis, for the record, I think that will be that exactly what I was proposing, and I think that's a great idea. Like Mary said, like Peter said, too. Is it really something that it is worth fighting about when we have so many different fights to fight? Maybe not. But if we all feel like it is, then we're going to take it on. And we're going to make sure that we bring in all the correct people to educate us. And I think another thing is something good that Mary said is, yes, we need to make sure that all the other Center for Independent Livings, all the other statewide independent living councils, we have to see how they feel. And because one council is not going to get it changed. We're going to have the collaborative effort of all to be able to make that change. So let's keep that on the agenda. Let's get someone from ACL. Let's get that person that Peter was talking about. If you can get that information to Dawn, so that we can reach out to that person and ask them to present for us, then we'll keep moving forward, and we'll keep trying to figure out what is the best way to go forward. I thank you all for all your comments. Every comment that we've gotten, whether for or against, was important to us, and they were all great comments, great ideas, and I can see how passionate you all feel about the subject one way or the other. And we are going to tackle this, but we're going to get the education that we need first, and then we're going to make that decision. If you all understand what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, Havander, Mary Evilsizer has her hand up. Can she speak again?
Yes, ma'am.
One final comment, and Havander, yes, you've hit it right on the head, working together, collaborating with all the other centers, the other states. But what I just wanted to note, and I'm sorry I didn't think of it sooner, but the term that is tied with our funding, it has a definition for a Center for Independent Living. And one of the first words in the definition is consumer controlled. A consumer is an individual with a disability that either works at a Center for Independent Living or it's a board member. So it's individuals with disabilities. So we're getting really into the rooted verbiage of the Rehab Act. So with that, when we request our speakers, Dawn makes sure that they know that we understand that. It's just something we're looking at. Again, we don't want to be embarrassed, but this is a wonderful conversation. And I believe it's conversations like this that will move us all into the future. Thank you for letting me speak.
You're very welcome, Mary. If there's anyone else who has a comment, or if not, we're gonna shelf it till we get some more education. We're gonna keep it on the agenda, and we're gonna move forward and try to come up with a solution that fits us all, and that we all can be proud of, and that we can all agree on.
Sounds like a plan.
Do we need
All
an
right.
amen?
No, we don't. There's no. We don't have to do no motions or anything like that. We've come up with a plan. Don has all the pertinent information. Peter's going to get us some information, and we're gonna move forward. So thank you all so much, and I love the way that you all speak on the things that you feel passionate about. That's what this committee is about: speaking on the things that we're passionate about, getting out there and advocating for the people who need advocating for, and doing what we need to do as a committee. So I applaud you all on that, and I appreciate you guys doing that. So thank you so much. And we are going to move on to the next agenda item.
Which you would like me to read?
I would.
So it's agenda item 13, discussion and approval of future meeting and agenda items and the meeting dates of April 9th and 10th of 2025. So does anybody, oh, go ahead, David Evander.
Evander Davis for the record. So we have already gotten one thing on our agenda, and three things on our agenda. Do you guys have anything else that you would like to see on our agenda for the 9th and the 10th of what was that, March or May? Did you say May or March?
No, it is April 9th.
April. Oh, there we go. Sorry about that. I'm trying to put you guys way back down there. Okay, April. So do we have anybody else who has anything else that they want to go on that agenda?
It looks like Mary has her hand up.
Yes, Mary.
Okay, with all due respect, again, thank you for letting me speak. At the last meeting, we had talked about perhaps having a presentation about the disaster preparedness website that the Centers for Independent Living have been working on statewide. And also we have a first draft of or cut of the statewide video that we'd like to show some clips of. I think I've checked with the presenter, and that would take about no more than 30 minutes, maybe 20 minutes with 10 minutes for question, if that would be allowable. Thank you.
This is Dawn Lyons. I do so apologize for missing that one again. I really apologize.
Okay.
It was not on purpose.
I realize that there's a lot going on. Thank you. Thank you for letting me speak.
We will, Evander Davis for the record, we will get that on the agenda, Mary, and thank you so much for bringing it back to our attention. We are all human, and we all forget things. So we will definitely, Mary, if you could, before that meeting comes up, give us another reminder. Make sure that we got that on the agenda, and so we can get that done. Thank you so much.
Will do. I'll work with Dawn, and Dawn, I'll get you all the information you need, and so we'll work together. Thank you.
Havana, this is Peter Whittingham for the agenda item. In the previous meeting, we had a conversation. In fact, it was another robust conversation about the literacy rate among our service population, persons with IDD. And I was expecting that it would have been a subject on the agenda. I think there was discussion that I would reach out to the Governor's Council on Developmental Disability to get some information on that, and it would be a subject on the agenda for discussion. I will tell you that I have seen posting by certainly Dawn about a study that has been done for in terms of education and literacy rate increasing in the schools for a certain age, but that study and article did not touch on the subject of persons with disability, and so I'm asking that we revisit that issue on the next agenda to take a look at the state information relating to Nevada, relating to the state of persons with literacy status of state of literacy with persons with a disability in Nevada.
This is Dawn Lyons. Peter, I didn't receive anything from you. Otherwise, I probably would have put it on the agenda. Did you have something that you can share in that regard?
No, I'm saying the last meeting that we had, if you recall, there was a robust conversation we had on the issue of literacy rate among persons with disability. And my understanding from that meeting was that it would have been placed on the agenda for this meeting.
I think what I understood, and I could be wrong, correct me if I'm wrong, but from what I understood, I do recall the conversation. And from what I recall, was that you were going to collect some data and bring it to the council. And that Ashley was also providing some information, which she got to us fairly quickly. So I distributed that immediately, but I didn't get your information. So as soon as I get your information and we can post it as a material, I can go ahead and make sure it's on the next agenda for sure.
Well, maybe I had different misunderstanding. Not that I would get you some information, but that it would be on the agenda for discussion, and then we will talk about it. But it was not on this agenda. So what I'm asking is that it be placed on the agenda for next meeting. And the information that was posted from Ashley, as you look closely at that, it speaks to the school and different grades in the school, and in fact, different groups in those grades in the school regarding the improvement of literacy rate. But it did not touch on the core subject that I was talking about, which is the literacy rate among persons with developmental disability in the state. And I remember talking about it because of my own experience in the Down Syndrome Organization of Southern Nevada, where we have discovered so many of our members, and they're not unique to members of this organization, but across the state. And the question that you had, which was a proper one, okay, how far does this go among our service population in the state? And what are some of the issues that we perhaps may need to discuss? And so if it was properly on the agenda, then in fact, I had a brief conversation with Catherine about it, and she was, her organization was ready to present some information or to provide me with information that we could discuss. But like I said, it was not on the agenda. So what I'm asking to do is to simply add this subject on the next agenda meeting for a discussion on the state of literacy among persons with intellectual developmental disability in the state.
This is Dawn Lyons. Thanks, Peter, for clarifying how you understood that. As the DAG stated earlier, we need to be very specific about what we're including on our agenda and what we intend to do with that information, if it should be an action item or what action should be taken, that kind of thing. And so without knowing what information we would even have, and I didn't even know that that the DD Council was going to present, and I wouldn't have known that unless you had mentioned that to me prior to creating the agenda, which would be really important to do that in advance. Linda, also, you have your hand up, and I'd like to hear her.
No, before Linda, let me just finish the conversation. I did not say that the council was prepared to present, which would have been something that I would pass on to you. I said I had conversations with Catherine, and she had information which she would give to me for discussion at the meeting. My request is that the item be placed on the agenda with a discussion and potential action regarding what our organization, our council can do to address the issue of literacy among persons with developmental disability in the state of Nevada.
All right, this is Evander Davis for the record. So what I'm understanding, because I'm listening to you both, Peter, we need some information saying what information we're gonna put out. Dawn needs to have that information. Once she has that information, we're gonna put it on the agenda.
Yeah, this is Dawn. The DAG is going to ask me, what action item are we considering? And they're going to ask me, what exactly are we going to discuss? And that needs to be on the agenda. But I know Linda's had her hand up for a very long time now, and I would really like to hear what you have to contribute, Linda.
Linda?
Thank you. This is Linda Vivoda for the record. I do remember this conversation too, Peter, because we talked about dyslexia and autism and all that other stuff. I did go to the library like I was going to, and I asked about some of their items that they have for reading literacy programs, and they do not even have anything on their list for helping disabled people to read. So I don't know, and I probably need some help from y'all to be able to get something started with them. But if it's not happening in the libraries here, then it's probably not happening other places where libraries are, to be specific, mainly Nevada. I'm worried that the schools are, and I know that we've gotten a lot of data from and about the schools on what they do, but I've also got some consumers that I work with still, and I advocate with, that do not write properly. They do not read properly, and they have difficulties in trying to understand forms and other things. So if it's not hitting in the schools and there's no programs for parents or for siblings to help their disabled family members or even their friends to go and get more help, then that's what we need to address, is how can we get it implemented into our system, into our state system, to have that as a program in our libraries or in our school systems to be more progressive. And I'm very avid about that. I have 2 autistic grandchildren. I have an autistic nephew, and I have a high spectrum. I forget what it's called. My brain's not working now, but Asperger's grandson. So I understand, because their reading level is not there, and I worry about that, because what are they going to do eventually in their life if they don't have somebody to back them up? And I think that we need that. So that's my 2 cents worth.
Vander Davis for the record. Well said, Linda. I have a granddaughter who's not doing very well with reading, and she's legally blind too. So I understand that all persons with disabilities, all the different levels, there is a big issue with literacy. In the blind community, some would say if you don't know how to read Braille, you're not literate, right? Some would say that. Now, I don't say that because I'm a assistive technology person, and I have read when my vision was a little better. But I understand exactly what we're saying. And yes, we do as a council, that falls under our scopes, trying to get some kind of program together, or some kind of program put in place to help our family members, friends with disabilities to be literate and to be more literate,
Yes.
for literacy. So what we're going to do is we're going to get some information together, and we're going to try and figure out how to get that worded right and with the information that we need so we can get it on the agenda. Don is going to work with Peter and you, Linda, and we're going to get that taken care of. We're going to get it done, and I hope that satisfies you both. But we are going to get that done. Okay.
Yes, and this is Dawn, if I might. I need to emphasize that this needs to be done well in advance of the meeting so that I can follow open meeting law by posting that agenda with the proper language and having it approved in a timely manner. So as soon as we can get this information, it seems like a long way off in April, but it's really not. So let's work together and make sure that we know which direction we're taking this in, so I can make sure it's on our agenda properly. Thank you.
All right. Is there any other anything else you would like to see on our agenda? You guys are so great, man. You guys are so good today. I really commend you all.
This is Dee Dee Formaster for the record. I I agree that literacy is a major problem that needs to be addressed. Let me just give you a quick for instance. I had a young man who was in Carson High School who they wanted to give an adjusted diploma to. And his parents said, absolutely not, because he wants to go to college. And so when I approached the school and asked about read and write goals and different assistive technology programs, they really weren't interested in that. So after speaking to the student and getting what he wanted in his life, I just basically said to the parents, well, I think you need to find an alternative education program for him. And they did. And last June, he graduated on the honor roll, mind you, with a regular diploma in June.
Havana Davis for the record. That is amazing. And like this, like we've always said, with the proper assistive technology and the proper modifications and accommodations, all children with disabilities can thrive and do better. And that's what we are here for, and that's what we're going to work on. Is there any other items that you guys want to see on the agenda?
Besides our standing agenda items, because those will always be there.
Right. Hearing and seeing none at this moment. You know that you always can contact Dawn, her email. You all have it. If you think of something else that you guys are dying to see on the agenda, just make sure we get it done in a timely manner. Okay.
Are we ready for my reading the public comment blurb?
Let's do it.
All right, agenda item 14, public comment. No action may be taken upon a matter raised under public comment period unless the matter itself has been specifically included on an agenda as an action item. To provide public comment telephonically, dial 1-253-215-8782, U.S. Tacoma. When prompted to provide the meeting ID, enter 929-904-1434 and passcode 707401. Comments will be allowed at the beginning and end of each day and will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Persons making comments will be asked to begin by stating their name for the record and to spell their last name and provide the secretary with written comments. And it looks like we have a hand up from Catherine Nielsen.
All right, Catherine, let's see what you got to say today.
Thank you so much, Evander. This is Catherine Nielsen for the record, and I will make it super short. The Developmental Disabilities Council has their last town hall next week on the 16th at 5:30. It is via Zoom. I will post the link in the chat, but just for ease, if you don't have access to that, you will find also the same information on our website. We're gathering information from the disability community on any barriers you're experiencing and any solutions that you can bring for those as well. So if you're available, we'd love to have you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Catherine. Do I have any other hands up?
I do not see any other hands.
Okay. Well, I would like to thank you all again for this meeting. It was very, very
Oh,
good. Very.
Evander, John Rosenlund just raised his hand. Sorry.
All right, John, come on in.
John Roseland for the record. Sorry, you started talking and I was trying to find the
Evander
button.
Davis for the record. You better be glad, John, because I was moving out.
You were moving forward. I just wanted to touch base, throw it out there. The Nevada Assistive Technology Council, that is one of the state advisory councils. Anyways, always looking for individuals that are interested in participating, that are assistive technology users primarily, or parents involved with an individual that uses assistive technology. I'd say I always like to hear from the consumer more than anything. But I know that council is continuously looking for more participation if people want to be involved in that. And it doesn't always need to mean that you've been a consumer of assistive technology services through the places that we do support under the Act. It can be people that have use AT and have experienced barriers or have things to share or give input. And if anybody is interested in the Nevada Assistive Technology Council, please reach out to myself. We also have Samantha that has been on this call. Just reach out to me. We'll get you to the people that you need to be in contact with. If you're interested in learning more about the Nevada Assistive Technology Collaborative and those services, please reach out to me as well, and be glad to share that and the good things that we can do there. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Many years ago, I was on the Assistive Tech Council. They do very good work. So if you guys are interested, please join up. Do I have any other hands up, Don?
I'm going to say it very slowly in case people are trying to hit that button, but I do not see any more hands up.
All right, you guys, I was saying again, thank you so much for participating. Thank you so much for all your ideas. Thank you so much for your passionate thoughts. And we will see you guys next time. This meeting is adjourned.
Thanks, Savannah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.